I will beat you if you sleep anywhere else. When he was a serf, they said to him, Let me find you in this field. I will hang you if I find you in anyone else's field. But now he is a tramp, they say to him, You shall be jailed if I find you in anyone else's field, but I will not give you a field. They say you shall be punished if you are caught sleeping outside your shed, but there is no shed. If you say that modern magistracies could never say any such mad contradictions, I answer with entire certainty that they do say them. A little while ago 2 tramps were summoned before a magistrate, charged with sleeping in the open air when they had nowhere else to sleep. But this is not the full fun of the incident. The real fun is that each of them eagerly produced about 2 pence to prove that they could have got a bed, but deliberately didn't. To which the policeman replied that 2 pence would not have got them a bed, that they could not possibly have got a bed, and therefore, argued that thoughtful officer, they ought to be punished for not getting one. The intelligent magistrate was much struck with the argument, and proceeded to imprison these 2 men for not doing a thing they could not do. But he was careful to explain that if they had sinned needlessly and in wanton lawlessness, they would have left the court with a stain on their characters. But as they could not avoid it, they were very much to blame. These things are being done in every part of England every day. They have their parallels even in every daily paper, but they have no parallel in any other earthly people or period, except in that insane command to make bricks without straw, which brought down all the plagues of Egypt. For the common historical joke about Henry VIII hanging a man for being Catholic and burning him for being Protestant is a symbolic joke only. The sceptic in the Tudor time could do something. He could always agree with Henry VIII. The desperate man today can do nothing. For you cannot agree with a maniac who sits on the bench with the straw sticking out of his hair and says, Procure 3 pence from nowhere, and I will give you leave to do without it. If it be answered that he can go to the workhouse, I reply that such an answer is founded on confused thinking. It is true that he is free to go to the workhouse, but only in the same sense in which he is free to go to jail, only in the same sense in which the serf under the gibbet was free to find peace in the grave. Many of the poor greatly prefer the grave to the workhouse, but that is not at all my argument here. The point is this, that it could not have been the general policy of a lord towards serfs to kill them all like wasps. It could not have been his standing advice to serfs to say, Get hanged. It cannot be the standing advice of magistrates to citizens to go to prison. And precisely as plainly it cannot be the standing advice of rich men to very poor men to go to the workhouses. For that would mean the rich raising their own poor rates enormously to keep a vast and expensive establishment of slaves. Now it may come to this, as Mr. Belloc maintains, but it is not the theory on which what we call the workhouse does in fact rest. The very shape and even the very size of a workhouse expresses the fact that it was founded for certain quite exceptional human failures, like the lunatic asylum. Say to a man, Go to the madhouse, and he will say, Wherein am I mad? Say to a tramp under a hedge, Go to the house of exceptional failures, and he will say with equal reason, I travel because I have no house, I walk because I have no horse, I sleep out because I have no bed. Wherein have I failed? And he may have the intelligence to add, Indeed, your worship, if somebody has failed, I think it is not I. I concede with all due haste that he might perhaps say me. The specialty, then, of this man's wrong is that it is the only historic wrong that has in it the quality of nonsense. It could only happen in a nightmare, not in a clear and rational hell. It is the top point of that anarchy in the governing mind which, as I said at the beginning, is the main trait of modernity, especially in England. But if the first note in our policy is madness, the next note is certainly meanness. There are two peculiarly mean and unmanly legal man-traps in which this wretched man is tripped up. The first is that which prevents him from doing what any ordinary savage or nomad would do, take his chance of an uneven subsistence on the rude bounty of nature. There is something very abject about forbidding this, because it is precisely this adventurous and vagabond spirit which the educated classes praise most in their books, poems, and speeches. To feel the drag of the roads, to hunt in nameless hills and fish in secret streams, to have no address save over the hills and far away, to be ready to breakfast on berries and the daybreak, and sup on the sunset and a sodden crust, to feed on wild things and be a boy again, all this is the heartiest and sincerest impulse in recent culture, in the songs, tales of Stevenson, in the cult of George Borrow, and in the delightful little books published by Mr. E. V. Lucas. It is the one true excuse in the core of imperialism, and it faintly softens the squalid prose and wooden-headed wickedness of the self-made man who came up to London with twopence in his pocket. But when a poorer but braver man with less than twopence in his pocket does the very thing we are always praising, makes the blue heavens his house, we send him to a house built for infamy and flogging. We take poverty itself, and only permit it with proper qualification. We allow only a poor man to be poor if he is rich, and we do this most savagely if he has sought to snatch his life by that particular thing of which our boyish adventure stories are fullest, hunting and fishing. The extremely severe English game laws hit most heavily what the highly reckless English romances praise most irresponsibly. All our literature is full of praise of the chase, especially of the wild goose chase. But if a poor man followed, as Tennyson says, far as the wild swan wings, to where the world dips down to the sea and sands, Tennyson would scarcely allow him to catch it. If he found the wildest goose in the wildest fenland in the wildest regions of the sunset, he would very probably discover that the rich never sleep, and that there are no wild things in England. In short, the English ruler is always appealing to a nation of sportsmen and concentrating all his efforts on preventing them from having any sport. The imperialist is always pointing out with exultation that the common Englishman can live by adventure anywhere on the globe. But if the common Englishman tries to live by adventure in England, he is treated as harshly as a thief, and almost as harshly as an honest journalist. This is hypocrisy. The magistrate who gives his son Treasure Island and then imprisons a tramp is a hypocrite. The squire who is proud of English colonists and indulgent to English schoolboys, but cruel to English poachers, is drawing near that deep place wherein all liars have their part. But our point here is that the baseness is in the idea of bewildering the tramp, of leaving him no place for repentance. It is quite true, of course, that in the days of slavery or of serfdom the needy were fenced by yet fiercer penalties from spoiling the hunting of the rich. But in the older cases there were two very important differences, the second of which is our main subject in this chapter. The first is that in a comparatively wild society, however fond of hunting, it seems impossible that enclosing and gamekeeping can have been so omnipresent and efficient as in a society full of maps and policemen. The second difference is the one already noted, that if the slave or semi-slave was forbidden to get his food in the green wood, he was told to get it somewhere else. The note of unreason was absent. This is the first meanness, and the second is like unto it. If there is one thing of which cultivated modern letters is full beside adventure, it is altruism.